That's the question.
Interesting question. My thoughts on Penuel. I think maybe I'll just do Penuel and DJ SBU, you know. Penuel the Black Pen. I think his name is Penuel Mlotshwa. I don't know if I can say he's a Zulu man because he's denounced his Zulu identity, and I should respect that, you know. So I think we can do a part 2 as well on this because I believe there's more to him than just meets the eye. Penuel, he's one thing I like about him, he's very confident, right? He's very confident. It takes balls, man, to actually stand up in front of a camera and speak to people that you don't even know. It takes balls to even further engage in controversial subjects, in hot topics, political statements. So I'll definitely give that to him. I believe in giving credit where it is due, right? And therefore I would give him credit for being a very confident man. He believes in himself and he's well spoken. I'm not talking about pronunciation or enunciation. I mean, he's able to deliver his message clearly. And I think the audience or the people who are meant to receive that message do receive it. So he's definitely put in the hours. He didn't just wake up one day and decide to publish content, but he's definitely put in the hours. You see, when that guy speaks about a subject, man, that he knows about, he really packages it nicely. I listened to one of his videos where he spoke about public schools and private schools in this country. And he went in deeply and very nicely. You see, a lot of people don't understand how the education system works in South Africa, but not just the education system, the entire system. They don't understand South Africa as a polity. And partly, the government is to blame for that. The average South African doesn't understand what South Africa is as a republic. A lot of people are just familiar with the area of birth and the area of upbringing, and that's it. But South Africa is a polity, which means it's a political structure. Therefore, we have a legislative arm, we have a judicial arm, we have, parliament with the legislature, is connected. And then we have different sectors like education. So I enjoyed where he spoke about public schools, which is a very few pupils who actually go to public schools in this country. I think more than 92% of kids go to... Most kids go to public schools and very few go to private schools. So I think more than 92% go to public schools. And public schools are schools that are managed independently or funded privately. So those would be schools that follow the IEB curriculum, whereas your public follow the CAPS. So he packaged that nicely, and that's just one example of the work he's done. He speaks about a lot of broad subjects, and I think sometimes, or maybe a lot of times, he's worthy of listening to. So I don't know him privately, at a personal level, but I do know he has multiple children, which I support very much. For a man who's able to take care of and raise children, it's very important to actually reproduce. It's very important to give birth. As a man, you have to give birth. That's your biological agenda, to use that seed that you have within you, make babies. And he has done that decently. I think he has about 5 kids, and there should be more. 20 should be fine. I think men should reproduce, especially men of a high caliber, highly intelligent men, highly competitive men, men with, very, very desirable characteristics should be giving birth. Because we already know people, I won't say undesirable people, but people with characteristics that leave a great deal to be desired, they're already giving birth, man. Guys who don't even raise their kids, they've got multiple children with multiple women. And we know that majority of children are fathered by a minority of men. So it's actually few men who actually mate with women and they give birth to children. Now, a lot of those men are not necessarily your most desirable, characters in society. So men who know that they are highly intelligent, highly competitive, have some competitive advantage, they have some genetic advantage, those men should be giving birth a lot. You see, Usain Bolt should be giving birth to a lot of kids, man. The guys, your athletes should be giving birth to a lot of kids. Guys like you and I, highly intelligent men, well-spoken men, men with a gift, you know, intellectual gift, artistic gift. Those guys should be giving birth. So I like that about him, that I think he understands from that perspective as well. So I don't know though how he is as a father. I haven't really delved into that, but I think he's very consistent in terms of the work he does on his channel, the Black Pen, and also in terms of how he works seamlessly and smoothly with DJ SBU. So if you go to virtual Mkuku, you see a different Penuel, and then if you go to the Penuel show, you see a completely different guy. You see he's very provocative there, and I like that. He's very challenging, very hard to deal with. You see, very hardcore. And you may get offended if you're someone who's unable to handle disagreement, you see. But then in virtual Mkuku, he allows his interviewees to speak, and I think it's nice to see those sides of this man. So generally as a person, I think he's interesting. I'm not saying he's a good person or a bad person. I'm saying he's an interesting person. And I think that's very important, to be interesting as an individual. I do not believe that you should be boring. I do not believe that you should be predictable. I think you should be a risky person. I think you should be an interesting person. I think that's what it takes, at least to an extent, for one to be a leader. You have to be very interesting, but also very consistent. And I think he has that quite decently. And I think we can do a part 2 on Penuel. Now on DJ SBU, I've met him. I met DJ SBU. Yeah.
What do you think about him and AfriForum?
Oh, damn. Oh, yeah. Apparently, he's a paying member of AfriForum. I mean, we can't impose our views on him, but I wouldn't do that. I would never do such. I would never give my money to people who don't need my money. AfriForum don't really need that money. If he says that, because I heard that he justified that joining AfriForum as a paying member by saying that he's doing it solely based on what they're doing, based on their track record. But I know AfriForum is fighting for the old apartheid flag, and some of his money, even if it's just 1 cent of his money, is going towards that cause. So I would be very careful if I were him when it comes to that. And I've also heard him talking about he doesn't care about race, he only cares about good people and bad people. But I do not believe in such. I don't believe in good people and bad people. You can't just, you know, it's not mutually exclusive. Some people may say Hitler was a bad person, but to others, maybe he was a very good person. If Hitler had any children, maybe he was a very good person to his children. So who's to say he was good or bad? If he was bad to you, doesn't mean he was bad to the next person. So his reasoning that he doesn't care about race or whatever, but rather he cares about someone being good or bad, doesn't work like that. There's no good or bad. It's usually both. You are good to some and you are bad to some. And that's exactly what it is. I'm good to some people, man, and I'm bad to others. That's just, it works like that. That's human nature. So justifying joining AfriForum based on whether they're doing good work or bad work is somehow, it's a fallacy. It's not true. Because they may be doing good work for some people, but maybe to some people, they are perceived as doing bad work. So his reasoning is not that. He joined AfriForum because he wanted to. He has his own reasons. It's not whether they are good or bad. He wanted to join them. That's his choice.
Is it because he wants to satisfy his white friends like Herzog?
Oh, Herzog, that Russian Jew, billionaire. Maybe he wants to satisfy, maybe he wants to appease people like Rob Herzog and his other friends. Or maybe not, we don't know. He has not been upfront with that. But I'm completely against the idea that he did it because they're doing good work. That's complete rubbish. He's lying. I would say it to his face. He's lying about that. I think there's more to it. Maybe he just wants to be controversial, you know. Maybe it's because he wants people to actually look him up. He wants people to start researching as to who he is. You know, people do that as well. They say the most outrageous things because they know it's some kind of clickbait. So maybe he's trying to manipulate the algorithm, you see? People do that. They say the craziest things ever, knowing very well that they don't really mean it, knowing very well that they will somehow apologize later on, but because it will give them some kind of traffic. So maybe it's because of that. You know, these content creators, the likes of Tabalo, he also does that very well. He will record himself fighting with traffic officers for absolutely very mundane reasons. But maybe it's because he knows that video is going to trend and it's going to get more viewership, you see? So that could be the reason. But I don't think he's against black people. I don't think so. Although he sometimes purports himself as someone who's not into this whole race thing, I think he's lying. I think he loves black people a lot. He understands. He's a very intelligent man. He understands the racial heritage of this country. South Africa is not a country where you can pretend as if racial issues do not exist. Everything here is wrapped into race. And I'm not saying that every day of our lives, all we think about is race. Absolutely not. I probably, 99.9% of my life has nothing to do with race. It's just me enjoying this blissful, pleasant existence as a human being. But when we discuss macro issues, macroeconomic issues, then race forms a very critical part. And Penuel is a leader that he is, as a thought leader that he is. I know very well, he's very well versed and he understands very well the racial heritage of this country. And I don't think he's unaware of that, and I don't think he's against black people at all. And I don't think he's against white people as well. I think he understands power and the balance of power, that not every white person out there is a powerful white person. Although in South Africa, statistically, the average white family is 5 times wealthier than the black family. But at the same time, we know very well that the average white person on the street doesn't have any power over you as a black person. But it's more on the structural side of things, you know. When you talk about banks, we're not talking about just any average white person. We're talking about billionaires, you know, the guys who run these oligopolies, the guys who run these monopolies. These are the people with power, the regulators who regulate the insurance industry, the banking industry, the finance sector. These are the white people with power that usually, you know, are the people who can change things within the blink of an eye. Like a Thanos snap, they can change things. So I think he's, as interesting as he is, he knows very well what's happening in the country. And I think a lot of what he does comes from a very good place, man. From a very good place. And I think it's not a bad thing to have a good relationship with all races in South Africa. Since we're in the majority, man, we have the upper hand in a lot of things, you see. We can, because whatever improvements we implement in the country, whatever progress we achieve in the country, it's in the best interest of everyone, including white, Indian, colored, and Chinese people, including foreigners, those ones who are legal and those ones who are illegal. Whatever the good thing we do in the country is going to benefit everyone, you see. So it's in the best interest of everyone else for the majority of this country to live a good life. When the majority are in poverty, obviously even the billionaires, man, will be affected by that, you see. So I think his membership on AfriForum, there's more to it. I'm more inclined towards the opinion that maybe he might be using it to drive, maybe to provoke, you know, conversation around that, maybe to provoke and instigate some kind of critical debate. But I don't think it's something that he fundamentally believes that AfriForum is doing a good job for majority of black South Africans. I don't think he believes that. Maybe they might be doing some good work for some South Africans, black, white, blah, 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 blah. And it's not just black people who don't agree with AfriForum. There's a lot of white people, I've seen white people firsthand who disagreed severely with AfriForum, especially from that whole thing of paying AfriForum monthly. A lot of white people are against that. So there's a racial undertone to it, but also there's an individual undertone to it. It's not just about group identity and group behavior. So yeah, can I get into DJ Sbu now?
Yeah.
So my thoughts on DJ Sbu. Also, man, this is just a few minutes of my observations. We can't, you know, profile a man of a high caliber like that in a few minutes. It would take books to write a man's story, right? So this is just observations. So I met him a few years back when I moved to Joburg. And I knew that I would have to meet him actually when I moved to Joburg. Yeah, I think he had recently published that book, Billionaires Under Construction. And I decided that I want to meet him. So I met him, DJ Sbu. I met Vusi Thembekwayo as well in Johannesburg. And there's this Bitcoin millionaire guy. Mpodagada, I think so, or Mpodagada. Now, when I think about DJ SBU, man, I like him a lot. I like him a lot. So probably there's a bias to my sentiments. You see, DJ SBU is a inspirational individual. It's something that's inside of him. He's not faking it. He's not pretending. He genuinely loves inspiring the masses. He's a man that's driven by a vision. He's driven by something that he really believes in. And it's not a vision of the future, but a vision of the present. Because you see, when you are at that level, even the future is the present. Things that have not come to being, you experience them in the now. And I think he's at that point. I've enjoyed watching his journey, both as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, as an entertainer, as an artist, but also as a spiritual being. His journey of growth and learning and unlearning as well. There's a lot of unlearning he's had to go through. But also I've appreciated the amount of loss he's had to encounter as a man, because I believe that loss is very, very necessary for a man. I'm not saying loss in the sense of just losing, but loss in the sense of losing and appreciating it, taking in those lessons from that loss, because loss is gain in reality. Loss is never loss, but loss is gain when you understand the spiritual elements amongst us, the spiritual elements upon which we live. Because we're just really a manifestation of the spiritual. We're a manifestation of energy. So I've been amazed by his journey of growth. So when I met him, it was at a book launch in UJ, and he spoke a lot about his growth and his journey from the townships. I think he comes from Tembisa, and he went to Vista, which is UJ Doornfontein now. He did some mechanical engineering or electrical, I'm not sure, but he did a form of engineering. And he's had a lot of hustles as well until he met his partner or his partners with whom they started together Mofire. He lost a job, in radio and in television. He used to host a very nice and successful show called Friends Like This. And he lost all of that because he believed in a vision. And that's what's needed for a man, to be able to take risks. You cannot live and operate in safety all the time as a man. You have to be bold enough to take risks so that you can bring to life things that do not yet exist. He believed in Mofire so much so that he risked an entire career in radio and television. And because he believed in it, he lost everything. But he didn't lose nothing because he gained everything at the same time. The beauty of not being driven by fear of loss, by fear of the familiar. You're not driven by the familiar past, but you're driven by a force, a belief that there's something greater that's coming. He could have been scared of advertising his Mofire to millions of viewers when he was hosting the awards on TV. He could have been scared of doing that because he knows the poverty from which he comes. He could have been scared because he knows that I'm good in radio, I'm good on television, this is my career. He could have been scared because he could lose all of that. But he chose not to fear. And I'm sure he was afraid, I'm sure he was nervous, but he chose not to live in that fear, but he triumphed over it. And that's the thing about courage. It's not the absence of fear, but
I think the weather is against us.
Nah.
And we have to maybe switch positions.
Okay.
Yeah.
You can. Oh, he could have been scared, but then that's the beauty of courage, because courage is not the absence of fear, but then moving in the presence of fear. Fear is very necessary. It's a natural force, a natural instinct. It's what has made our ancestors, to our species, to survive, because we fear some things. It's like a warning light, but then sometimes fear at the same time is a limitation. He could have chosen to fear and stay with Metro and stay on SABC 1, and he could have really succeeded very well, but then he would have been a different SBU, the SBU who surrendered to fear. So I love that about him. He's a risk taker, just like me. I identify with him like that. You see, he's a risk taker, he makes bold moves, and he loves young people. You see, it's important to love young people, to create a succession plan, and I think that's where SBU and this guy Penuel, the Black Pen, they merge nicely, because Penuel believes a lot in succession as well. You can't just want to be the one. That whole parable of the one black person. Oh, he's the first black person to win this. Oh, he's the first black person to have an energy drink company. Oh, he's the first black. No, SBU doesn't care about that nonsense. Because as much as he's doing what he's doing, he's pulling thousands with him, millions even with him. And I like that about him. He's willing to learn from young people, man. Which speaks to a high level of humility as well. You see? And trust me, he's not a perfect man. He's made a lot of mistakes that I don't even know about. But I'm pointing out the positive now. And I deeply appreciate the man, because of the amount of work he's put in. I appreciate both of them. Penuel, the black pen, and DJ SBU, I appreciate you, gents. I think we need more men like you, in a very toxic country like South Africa, where every day we are bombarded with news that the men, very old men and very old women who are in charge or were put in charge of this country are, flushing it down the drain, down the toilet. It's very important to have young men, middle-aged men, fathers, who are driving a very positive narrative. So for me, I choose to focus on the positive, man, when talking about these guys. We could look at the negative. It's important to look at the holistic picture. But I think for now, let's focus on the positive. I deeply appreciate them. And I see myself in each and every one of these men who wake up every day, who grind, who lose a lot. They lose a great deal. And they've taken a great risk of putting themselves out there on social media. They get ridiculed, man. They get criticized. And it needs a thick skin for them to be able to go through all of that and still produce content. And I know for a fact they've saved thousands of lives from giving up, from hopelessness, from despair, from suicide, just by putting themselves out there. So, gents, I salute